Hi, welcome back to Believing Thomas. My name is Maeve and I'm so happy that you're here. I make videos on topics related to Christian apologetics, the soul, and human flourishing, so if any of that interests you, then you're in the right place. Now, if you've been here for the last few episodes or whatnot, the last few videos, you'll probably notice that my background is different. Just switching some things around at home, and so I'll probably be changing filming locations a couple of times. You may also notice that I'm not holding my little microphone. I think I've worked out the audio to where I don't have to do that anymore, which is great because I like talking with my hands, so that will feel a lot more natural. In the past few videos, we've focused largely on how we communicate with ourselves. However, today I want to lean into the other side of that and how we communicate with others. We find ourselves in all types of conversations with all types of people every day. And if you're anything like me, you might struggle when conversations feel disconnected, scripted, forced, shallow sometimes, and often find yourself wanting to talk about different types of things or have different types of conversations with people, specifically want to be in more meaningful, productive, enjoyable type conversations. That is the journey that I am on, and so I have compiled a list of 8 things that I have learned and am learning along the way, and so I hope that it is helpful for you. Now, a quick caveat before we jump in: not each of these tips will be applicable for every type of situation. It's also not to say that if a conversation doesn't look a specific way, then it is shallow or meaningless, or that all types of meaningful conversations have to look a certain way. There's room for a lot of variety here, and so I just want to acknowledge that. So one good rule of thumb, I suppose, that I found is to find the fun often. Oftentimes when we think of meaningful conversations, we often think of them as being really deep or profound, maybe emotional, even soul-bearing sometimes. But meaningful conversations don't have to always look like that. And I think that's one of the, most surprising things that I've been learning personally, even though maybe it sounds a little obvious to you, I don't know. But just the power, the virtue, the goodness of just having fun. I think a good way to embrace this is by leaning into your own sense of humor. So whether your sense of humor is witty or dry or goofy or punny or whatever that looks like, find ways to just kind of have fun in the conversations that you're in, because if you're having fun, they're probably having fun. And having fun is so much more than a good laugh. Having fun can be such a trust builder. It can really pull people's walls down, both your own and, whatever people that you're having a conversation with. I think finding the fun in a conversation can also look like leaning into what you're genuinely curious about, finding ways to kind of play with difficult situations instead of, getting really rigid. But I think in our regular everyday to-day lives, leaning into enjoying yourself in a conversation, having fun, joking around can serve to be immensely meaningful and can help create a pathway to some of those deeper, more personal types of conversations as well. Number 2 is to know how to ask good questions. And this is true whether you have just met someone or someone that you've known for a long time, someone that you're close to. This is good in conversations where, maybe you're talking about faith or your convictions, your opinions. Knowing how to ask good questions not only serves to create understanding between two people and create kind of a wealth of knowledge between two people, but also to extend goodwill. And asking good questions really shows the person across from you that you find them interesting, you find them important, you find them worth knowing. And when it comes to asking good questions in kind of more tense situations, more difficult type of conversations. I think back to the writer Greg Kokel, and he wrote that a couple of the best questions that you can ask are, what do you mean by that? And how did you come to that conclusion? Now, these questions can take on different forms, right? Based off of the specific situation that you find yourself in. But when we ask these questions, we show that we, even if we don't agree, that we genuinely want to understand the position of the person across from us. We genuinely want to understand their mind and their heart, and it also gives them a chance to elaborate before we maybe jump to conclusions or jump in with our own opinions. It helps us to listen to understand instead of listen to respond. And then oftentimes these questions can lead into better, more specific questions, because when you're asking somebody who has stated their opinion, for example, like, oh, how did you arrive there? Like what makes you believe that? What convicts you of that? They may go into data, research, their experiences, and so you're able to really dig deeper into the mind of the person. These questions can also look different. So instead of, oh, what do you mean by that? It might look like, oh, tell me more about that. Or you said, you experienced this in the past. Can you tell me what was that like for you? That seems like a unique experience. And even being intuitive here, trying to put yourself in the shoes of the other person and asking them questions that relate to the things that they've said, because you're genuinely curious. Because, asking questions is not a tactic per se to have better conversations. I mean, it is, I suppose, but my mind goes to a quote by C.S. Lewis. I know I've mentioned him in a couple of my videos, but he has a quote where it's something along the lines of, you have never met an ordinary person in your life. And I think that is so foundational to asking good questions, because I think asking good questions really stems from a mindset of really valuing and being genuinely interested in the person across from you, knowing that that person is a soul that has never existed before in the universe and will never quite exist in the same way again, knowing that they have a unique experience with life, that they are on a unique journey, that they have a unique perspective and mind and thoughts. And so I think it's important to lean into curiosity here. Lean into asking questions from a place of acknowledging that person's worth and acknowledging that person's inherent interestingness, I guess, for lack of a better word. Number 3 is one connected to this last one, and I would say number 3 is be willing to break the rules. So whether they're more formal rules or more unspoken, at least from my perspective, I often experience or feel like there's so many rules to how we should express ourselves, to maybe what meaningful friendships look like, to the things we should and shouldn't say, the things that are embarrassing, the things that aren't okay. And I've also found that one of the most refreshing things within conversations that often leads to more meaningful conversations is to be willing to break those rules a little bit. So this could look like, a whole variety of things. It might look like just kind of calling out when a situation feels uncomfortable. For example, it could be saying, I know everybody is making small talk, but I just have a hard time with that, because I've actually done that before, and the person across from me has been like, oh my gosh, me too, right? It could look like asking the question that's maybe a little bit risky. This could look like expressing your actual thoughts instead of trying to tamp them down in order to make the other person more comfortable, because your opinion may not be very popular. And I don't think there's a hard and fast rule here. I think it's just something that takes a bit of discernment and just an awareness of the specific person that you're talking with, the specific conversation that you find yourself in. But one thing that I have found, whether I am the one breaking the rules or when I am on the receiving end of this, is that it can be so disarming as well when one person is comfortable enough with themselves to be a little bit risky, or to be a little bit different, or to express something maybe a little unexpected. I think that's so refreshing and interesting, and can really be a pathway to very meaningful, very open and honest conversations, instead of feeling like maybe at times a chess game, or kind of walking on these eggshells of like, well, I don't know what they think, and I don't know how they'll respond, and what if they think this about me, and you know, kind of internalizing all of this. I think, again, back to that first one, if we're able to relax a little bit and just lean into a conversation and be willing to shake things up now and again, I think that can go a long way. Number 4 is something that in my own head I call be the host, but it's really about focusing on the other person's comfort. So, you know, if you have any sort of social anxiety, social awkwardness, it is so easy to find yourself in situations and to immediately get anxious and tense up and really internalize the whole situation, and naturally be focused on questions like, am I coming across weird? What do they think about me? Am I making a good impression? Do they like me? And all that type of stuff. And I have so much compassion for that. I think that's something that a lot of people experience in some form or other, myself included. And one thing that I find to be helpful is to try to, you know, to the best of our ability, to flip the script a little bit. That when we find ourselves really internalizing a social situation or a conversation that we're in, to try to turn it around a little bit and use that energy to think like, okay, I want to feel comfortable in this conversation or in this situation. How can I make the person across from me feel comfortable? And so by doing that, I feel like it's acknowledging that, hey, the other person across from you might be feeling the exact same way. And it takes that energy that we use to turn inward, and it's turning it outwards and thinking about what the other person might be experiencing, and how we can help the other person to relax, to have fun, to feel accepted, whatever it is. And so one thing that I've personally started doing, I am far from perfect at it, is when going into situations, almost pretending at times that I am the host that has organized this situation, and it is my job to help people feel comfortable and relaxed, and to have a good time, or to be concerned about, you know, if they're having a good day, or whatever it looks like. So if that doesn't work for you, then just scrap it. I think the point still remains that having meaningful conversations are often easier and more enjoyable when we're able to get out of our own heads a little bit. Number 5 is be open to learning something new. So in an earlier point, I mentioned that C.S. Lewis quote about how we've never met an ordinary person in our lives. We've never met a mere mortal, and that every person is a unique soul with a unique mind, a unique heart, unique experiences, that their experience with this life is just as vivid and as rich and as real as each of ours. And so I genuinely think that we can learn something from every experience with every person. Now that's probably going to look wildly different depending on who you're talking to and what the conversation is like, but I think when we're looking to learn something new, that can go a long way towards approaching with a sense of just openness and humility, and just seeing like, oh, what does this person have that I can learn from? Number 6 is have boundaries. I think boundaries are so important, and I feel like that's something that is being talked about more within the culture. And I think it's one of those things where there's a ditch on either side, so to speak. And so when I say have boundaries, I think what I'm saying is to know what your principles are, what you value. I think it's to lean into having respect for yourself and navigating situations, navigating friendships, navigating whatever, in line with those principles and values and self-respect. There's a quote somewhere, I'm not sure who it's by, that says you can only meet people as deeply as they've met themselves. So you can be doing everything right, you can genuinely really want a meaningful conversation with somebody. They may not be always able to meet you where you want to meet them. You'll also run into people that are at a certain place in their journey where they're not able to extend the appropriate amount of respect or trustworthiness or whatever that is necessary for a healthy connection, a healthy friendship. It's good to know for yourself what goes into a good acquaintanceship, to know who you want to open up to and who you maybe want to have more boundaries with. And that doesn't mean that, like, I still think that you can have meaningful conversations with anybody, but I think having certain boundaries helps you in navigating these meaningful conversations, because knowing what matters to you, knowing your principles, knowing your values, knowing yourself will help you to kind of stand on your own 2 feet within conversations instead of falling victim to the power of certain emotions or certain unhealthy situations, etc. Number 7 is go slow. This may not mean quite literally talking slowly, even though I often do. Going slow is more about being in an internal state of peace, of slowness, of consideration, of intentionality. I think really good conversations, really meaningful connections and conversations come from a place of authenticity. And I think sometimes, whether we are anxious, whether we are eager to express our opinion or our thoughts or whatever it is, or whether we feel a need to fill the silence, sometimes this spirit of speed can kind of make our conversations feel a way that we don't want them to, or may express something that we don't actually want to express. Going slow might look like just really listening and chewing on what the person across from you is saying. Giving yourself a moment for emotions to soak in and then to respond. It could be saying, I don't actually really know what I think about that. I think I would need time to kind of mull that over. It could look like learning to be more comfortable with silence instead of feeling the need to fill it. It could look like learning to be okay with kind of awkward moments and just kind of rolling with the punches. So even if you are a very dynamic, engaging type of talker, or whatever your communication style is, I think having an internal spirit of slowness with the way that we communicate is really good fuel for having meaningful conversations with other people. Number 9 is be aware of body language. Now, you've probably heard some stat like, 93% of our communication is nonverbal. I've heard 30%, I've heard 60%, but whatever that looks like, our body language, our tone, our facial expressions, whatever it is, do go a long way in our conversations with people. For me personally, it is such a habit for me to crunch my eyebrows as I'm thinking and as I'm talking. And I had the realization at one point that I wonder if I look unwelcoming. Not that there's anything bad with crunched eyebrows or anything like that. I was just looking for ways to connect with people more, connect with people better. And so I started just trying to raise my eyebrows more as I talked with people. And I would notice that when I would intentionally raise my eyebrows, they would do the same in turn, which I think is just a really cute thing about humans, is that we tend to mirror each other's body language. But I think if we're specifically trying to show openness in the way that we conduct ourselves with our body language, with our faces, with our tones, whatever, that can communicate a lot no matter what our words say. And lastly, I would say to embrace your unique communication approach. And I think this is so important, again, because like I said, I think meaningful conversations really stem from a place of authenticity. And I can't tell you how many times that someone has either apologized to me or I've apologized to someone else for being like awkward or being bad at small talk, or when it maybe feels like they're taking too long to respond, or they feel like they're being annoying, or they feel like they made a stupid joke, or because they feel like they're rambling, or they feel like they're intruding, or whatever it is. I think it's really easy, maybe especially for women, to feel the need to just apologize, you know, for taking up space or for talking the way that we talk. And so maybe you talk in a way where you tend to jump from story to story, from topic to topic, because they're all related in your mind. Or maybe you are naturally very quiet. You're more on the shy side, maybe. Maybe you feel like you ramble, or like you have a really loud laugh, or you have an awkward sense of humor, or whatever it is. There is a place for you within meaningful conversations. And I think leaning into your specific quirks, the specific way that you communicate, can actually be really powerful. We are most comfortable with ourselves. We're also signaling, we're also expressing to the person across from us that it's okay for them to be themselves too. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, if you have insecurity or anxiety, which I think everybody, you know, has insecurity and such to some level. I'm not saying that you can't have meaningful conversations if you are uncomfortable or something like that. No, of course you can. And at the same time, I think it's so powerful to lean into your unique communication style, because there are people that will connect with that. And even when you feel like you are not unpalatable. Sure, there will always be people with something to say, but at the end of the day, there is a place for you within meaningful conversations. And so I would just say lean into that. So as I get to the end of this video here, I'm curious to know some of the things that you have learned on your way that I may benefit from. Or was there anything here that was maybe new to you or stood out to you? Anyway, I would love to hear your thoughts down below. I always do. If you have made it to the end of this video, thank you so much. I so appreciate that. If you liked it, I'd really appreciate if you gave it a like, shared, subscribe. It means a lot to me. And so I will see you in the next video. Much love.